About this secret offense, how did it work? You know, how did you run it? How much time do you have to spend with it?
And to see how many teams literally tried to copy or invented somewhat copies of Royal's Wishbone in itself is just suggestive of how this sport really honored Darrell Royal as one of the great coaches and the great innovators.
Darrell K. Royal, University of Texas, wins 184, national championships 3, conference championships 11, recruits Tommy Nobis, James Street, Earl Campbell. Oklahoma doesn't have an inferiority complex. They are just plain inferior. And the sooner everyone accepts this as fact, we can just move on. Hook 'em horns.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what sets the two, Texas and Oklahoma, apart from any other rivalry. It's because Texas has always lorded it over the state of Oklahoma.
The Oklahoma Red River Bridge War with Texas in the early part of the 20th century, where Oklahoma's Governor Murray sends out the National Guard to protect their bridge. And so you had a lot of things, there were a lot of historical precedent for ill feelings even before they started playing football.
I remember when I moved to Oklahoma, taking Oklahoma history class, you know, hearing about National Guards, you know, being sent to the Red River.
Two states that are split by a river. One has had accolades forever about having heroes. The West was one in Texas.
I think it affects the way people think about themselves, not just about their favorite team, not just about their university or their football program.
Oklahomans think Texans are arrogant.
You know, everything's bigger in Texas, great, whatever.
And I think on Texas side, they think Oklahomans are inferior to them.
Whatever.
They're named the Sooners, named after the land rush where people left a little bit too soon.
Texas was viewed in an awful lot of years as the haves versus the have-nots.
Oklahomans, many, not everyone, but certainly many Oklahomans find their identity through football, and that identity is never so pronounced as when they can beat Texas.
When Oklahoma loses to Texas, there's a state of depression that goes on. Some folks, for 364 days, they live for that game. They have to have that, they have to win that game. And if they don't...
It's sackcloth and ashes. People don't want to get out of bed and get mad at the newspaper for whatever it wrote, for including the final score, usually.
The University of Texas has always had this feeling about itself that we are the University of Texas. We are bigger and better, and, you know, we're Texas and you're not type of thing.
If you're ever fortunate enough to see a Texas OU game, you're going to see one of the great rivalries in the history of sports.
It's not just a football game. I mean, it's never been just a football game.
Plus, people in Texas say, well, you recruit all of our Texas boys, that's why you have a good team.
That's a constant source of frustration, it seems like, from some from Texas, with players like Billy Sims and David Overstreet and Greg Pruitt, and just one after another crossing the Red River to come to Oklahoma.
Well, the reason for that is Texas has about 1,000 or more high schools, whereas Oklahoma has about 200 high schools in the state.
I've never really understood what the big deal was. I mean, you don't need a passport to cross a state line. People go to school all over America, wherever you want to go, so.
If you've got a school in the state of Texas, you can recruit on a bicycle. You just go around the neighborhoods and pick out the kids that are within 25 miles of where you're coaching.
Also, as you look at it, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is just a key recruiting ground for both teams. When you look at the rosters, when you look at the great players that have come out of here, and this game kind of sets the tone for the recruiting battles that go on going forward, are the lifeblood of both programs. I mean, it really is one of those things that goes beyond just one game, but it really defines two states.
You don't have to wonder year to year if the rivalry is going to be intense or passionate or loud. You can be assured of it.
The thing that has sustained the rivalry in football particularly is the Cotton Bowl and the way it's set up for the OU-Texas game. right down the middle, split 50-50.
Two horseshoes that come together, one orange, one red.
In other words, neither team has the home field advantage. Oklahoma to the south, Texas to the north on that stadium, and it's an incredible sight.
90,000 people that are going to be there, and half wearing orange and half wearing red.
I'd like to think of it as kind of like the Red Sox-Yankees on steroids.
Exactly in between the two campuses in Austin and Norman, and the fact that these two schools have played at an extremely high level in football for decades.
It's a classic border war that has so much to do with pride, and before they became conference rivals, it was that classic non-conference game that captured the imagination. And then you look at the coaches, the historical figures that have been in this game. But I think it comes down to state pride.
This is one of those rivalries that brings everything to the table, and there is a genuine level of dislike, but maybe at a fever pitch right now. I mean, this has continued through the decades. It's shown remarkable staying power, and I think it is the greatest rivalry in college football.
People in Texas will fry up a tarantula and call it calamari, then slap a gob of Heinz ketchup on a side of beef and call it barbecue, Texas style. Boomer Sooner. There are a lot of people who have mean things to say about Barry Switzer, but since most of them send their kids to school wearing burnt orange, one must consider the source. The two groups of people you rarely hear talking bad about Switzer, and no, not even in Texas, are parents and players. And in a real way, that's insight into the man. Football may be watched by fans, analyzed by color commentators, and dissected by former coaches. But it is players and parents who feel every hit and stand breathlessly as their child is vilified by some adult wearing a different color. It is to these people whom Barry Switzer endeared himself. Barry identified and connected, like whole cloth, with every kid who knew what it was like to have a single pair of jeans and an empty carton of milk in the refrigerator. If Switzer's coaching was remarkable, 3 national championships and a routine thrashing of everything burnt orange, it was his keen ability to understand the depth of the human condition, with all its frailties and possibilities, that set him apart. 157 wins and a Super Bowl victory are the exclamation point, but the real story is the soul of the Arkansas man who was and is the bootlegger's boy.
Barry Switzer is what I call a lovable rogue.
Barry Switzer's a lightning rod. You either love Barry Switzer or you'd hate Barry Switzer.
He can, he can go all places and people fall in love with him. The possible exception probably is Austin, Texas.
Barry is well liked in Oklahoma, despised in Texas. See, that's what happens when you beat Texas too many times.
He was also a great football innovator. That he's the guy that pulled the trigger on the midseason wishbone in 1970 and changed college football. I don't think he's ever gotten enough credit for that. That was a daring maneuver that worked out famously for Oklahoma.
Barry Switzer really defined the 70s. He was the guy who ran the wishbone, got the athletes to do it. Colorful guy, funny guy, told great stories, and it's hard to think of him now that he's still younger than Joe Paterno. He could be coaching the sidelines now. And you look back at it, one of 2 coaches to have won a national championship and a Super Bowl as well.
Barry doesn't have a major ego, all right? He's down to earth. His greatest skill is he can relate to players, which makes him an outstanding recruiter. So he's not your typical X's and O's coach.
Everybody says Barry doesn't coach football. He's not a great X's and O's guys. I disagree. It's the personality of Barry that he was so outlandish and so inspirational. But people forget that you've still got to be able to coach in this game, and he could coach.
I've always likened him to King David, a guy who was, slightly immoral, but a man after God's own heart. Well, Switzer's that way. He's slightly immoral, but a man after Oklahoman's own heart. So,
by his own admission, yeah, Barry Switzer may have bent the rules on a few occasions. I think the NCAA would confirm that. Certainly, that was something that bothered Darrell Royal quite a bit, and may have led to Darrell's retirement.
I mean, my first recollection of Texas OU as a kid growing up in New York was 1976 and the 6-6 tie. And then later coming to understand that Darrell Royal believed that Barry Switzer was spying on Texas that week, which was denied at the time, but then was later told to be the truth.
Now, if OU wasn't any good, there would be no Spygate. Back in the 70s, Texas coaches were saying that Barry spied on their practices. Maybe he did, but all fair in love and war. And OU Texas is definitely war.
On a day when the heavens opened and rain poured forth like an autumn apocalypse, the Sooners and the Longhorns played to a 15-15 tie. In Switzer's view, it was a game stolen from the Sooners. Although there was no instant replay back then, 25 years later, technology proves Barry had a legitimate gripe. The Longhorns on that rainy Saturday were assisted by 3 of the most improbable calls imaginable. The game's outcome turning on each. One could say that what happened to Switzer and the Sooners in that game was, well, Orwellian. But after all, it was 1984.
But 3 ineffective downs left the Sooners backed up to their own end zone. Rather than risking a punting miscue in the torrential rain, Barry Switzer decided to take a safety and free kick. And so, down by a field goal, Texas took possession with 2:10 to play and 56 yards of real estate to cover to protect their claim as America's top team. And then came the controversy. Oklahoma's Tony Casillas recovered a Texas fumble, but officials ruled that the ball carrier was already down when he lost the handle. A hotly disputed interference call gave Texas a first down on the OU 41-yard line. With just 19 seconds to play, quarterback Todd Dodge let fly a high, wobbly pass to the right corner of the end zone. OU Stansbury emerged with the ball, but an official ruled him out of bounds. Despite strong Sooner protest, Texas was still alive. Shaken by so many close calls, Longhorn coach Fred Akers opted to spend the final play of the game on a field goal. Jeff Ward split the uprights. The scoreboard read 15 all, and the clock showed 0. The Longhorns were happy to escape without a loss, and the Sooners went home frustrated.
Barry Switzer, there's a guy that's, as long as Oklahoma's playing football, there's going to be some shrine to Barry Switzer, and fans are going to pay attention to it.
Barry Switzer, Oklahoma, wins 157. Conference championships, 12. National championships, 3. Recruits, Greg Pruitt, Billy Sims, Tony Casillas. Oklahoma may have won a few games in the series, I give you that. But could they win if their people weren't down here stealing our Texas players? Answer that. Hook 'em horns. People from Texas and Oklahoma know a thing or two about droughts. And one thing they've developed is the patience to wait them out. The 90s were like a drought. The teams weren't competing for national championships. And while many of the games entertained, they were something less than remarkable. It was still Texas and Oklahoma. But let's just say that during the 90s, it was rivalry with a lowercase r.
Well, the 90s with the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry was really everybody trying to hang on and probably nostalgic for another time because things weren't as great for either one. Oklahoma was probably in the doldrums a little bit more than the University of Texas was, but you look at these two teams and maybe this rivalry game was the only thing that really meant something. There were other teams in the conference that were actually doing better than the University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma. So really when they came together at the Cotton Bowl, all they had was this rivalry and the discussion and the, kind of the fights that kept this thing going until both teams got better between the chalk.
For a while,